Welcome back, everyone, to Biohacking Eve. Today, we're tackling something that underpins literally everything else we discuss on this podcast: your skeleton. Your bones are the foundation your entire body is built on, and yet bone health is probably the most overlooked area in the biohacking and longevity space, especially for women. In part one, we're going deep on what osteoporosis and osteopenia actually are, why women are disproportionately affected, and the surprising biology that no one is telling you about. In part two, we'll cover how to test, what the options are, and what you can actually do about it, from cutting edge technology to zero budget approaches. My guest today is Gary Rhodes, founder of Scream My Bones and a passionate advocate for proactive skeletal health. Gary works with technologies like Equilite REMS and biodensity to help people detect, prevent, and even reverse bone loss. And his journey started with something deeply personal, reversing his own grandmother's osteoporosis. Gary, welcome to Biohacking Eve.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Welcome back to Biohacking Eve, Health Optimization for Women with Judith Miller, where we shine a light on everything that will help you reach your best self as a woman, as unique and individual as only you can be. Live long and prosper, my friend.
So let's start at the beginning. Tell us about your grandmother. What happened and how did that experience change the trajectory of your career?
Yeah, my grandmother was diagnosed with osteoporosis, and this was maybe 14 years ago, 2012. So like everybody who cares about the family, and especially the grandmother who really sort of brought me up, when she told me she had osteoporosis, I always remember the way she said it. She said, unfortunately, I've got osteoporosis and it comes to all of us. And it was almost like the later chapters of her book have already been written. And I just, as a grandson, didn't want to tell her I've got the answers, but I thought there's no way in this moment I can just accept what she's saying. So I just turned around and said, look, don't worry, we're going to figure this out. We can reverse osteoporosis. Very positive, but with really no experience or any idea really that this could be reversed. So when she told me this, I did go to the doctors with her because I wanted to understand exactly what osteoporosis was. And then after finding out, when the doctor said, unfortunately, osteoporosis is a disease, and unfortunately, we all get it later in life. So it's what my grandmother said to me, and we just have to find a way to manage your nana's decline. And that sentence got me, like, manage my grandmother's decline. Who wants to manage somebody's decline? I certainly don't. And she was a very fun-loving grandmother. She was very glamorous. I always say this, but her hair was immaculate. I never saw her without a makeup on. So to see this amazing person that had really been there for me all my life, to accept that was just not a possibility. So that sort of led me on the journey to where I am today, of finding a way to help her. I don't want to get to the punchline, but I was able to help her reverse osteoporosis in 23 months by searching wide and far and speaking with the top experts in the world to find out what is osteoporosis, why do we get osteoporosis, can we avoid osteoporosis, and all the questions that would naturally come to somebody.
I think doing that in 23 months, when you compare that to your X number of years and really decades of decline over lifetime, that's very impressive. So you've described your work as shifting from reactive treatment to preventive care. What does that actually mean in the context of bone health? What's broken about how we currently approach this?
I just think in whole, we pretty much a reactive care system. Taking the NHS, for example, it's very much symptoms, and then we look at the symptom and we medicate. Just generally, nobody's looking for the causation. So when I say preventative, not reactive, it just started with my grandmother. That was very reactive, especially now knowing what I know, that osteoporosis could have been avoided, certainly could have been prevented. And the only time she found out she had weak bones was when she broke a hip. That's crazy. So for me, it was really about how do we change the way we look at bone health? Because bones are not sexy. If I started to talk about osteoporosis, I could see the blood draining from people's faces, because we talk about muscles and aesthetics and it's much more pleasing. We all go to the gym to be strong. But when you think about it, everything is attached to the bone, but it's never talked about. So for me, the reactive care system is unfortunately the way that the world is. I think it's designed by that. That's my opinion. And how can we be proactive in what we're going to do now to the mission of Scream My Bones, and what I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to really is to focus on how we can optimize human performance and health. And whilst it might have started with my grandmother, that's took me on a 14-year journey, traveling the world, being able to speak on Tony Robbins' stage, sharing that inspirational story, which I think gives everybody hope, because she was 79 And to hear the story that we took her from minus 2.7 back into the normal ranges of a 30-year-old is inspiring. And it makes everybody think if she could do it, maybe I could do it. And then you ask the question, what age does osteoporosis start? It doesn't start when you're 65, 70. I would say it really starts in your late 20s, early 30s, because that's when we hit peak bone mass. And then every year we start to lose 1 or 2%. So again, if we're going to be proactive and look at preventing, when should we get a bone scan? And that's where I thought we really need to be screening much earlier, not because you're old and you've got osteoporosis and scary and it's wrist fractures and osteoporosis. No, actually, if you're 30 and we can tell you where you are, and 5 years later we can show you those data points, and 5 years later show you again, that's valuable information. The minute we start to decline, we can do something about it. And that's now what we're on a mission to do. And it's working out really well with a lot of people, certainly 30s to 40s, especially women going through the menopause. And then this huge thing with weight loss clinics that they're losing weight, but they're also losing muscle and bone, which again is a very topic taboo right now.
This is interesting. Let's stick with that. What have you seen so far? Because you're really at the source of truth in the sense that you're seeing not the people when they go in and want to have that weight loss, but you see them coming to you for whatever reason once they've gone through that journey.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that the peptides that are out there now, GLP-1s, tirzepatide, and these weight loss drugs are amazing. It's not negative. I think it's like anything. We have to be responsible as to how we do things. And if somebody's truly obese, they're a miracle. They're going to really help people to set that process in place and lose weight. What's really devastating to see is that they don't really get the information, or certainly enforce, which should be, that when you take a weight loss drug, you have to be mindful as what weight are you actually losing. And we are losing muscle. Why? Because when people take weight loss drugs, they're not exercising, they're not lifting heavy weights, they're not getting the right dietary protein, they're not getting the raw materials that's needed. And I think this quick fix thing where I can take a weight loss drug and then suddenly 6 weeks later, you can't recognize the person that you've known, and they look great, they may look great, but again, that's not going to last very long, because when you lack the nutrients, then we're starting getting into metabolic health and I would say a rapid decline, because muscle and bone are really important. And I've seen so many people that I know dear to me, and without me lecturing them or saying, hey, I'm not going to get in the way of what you want to do, but let's be responsible about this. And in the UK, you've got people like Morrison's, which is a huge supermarket chain. You've got Asda, which is part of Walmart. You've got Boots, which is a pharmacy. These have got thousands and thousands of locations that are now getting in on the weight loss drug. So you can just click on the Morrison's and click on the weight loss clinic. You can actually put your weight into a calculator, and let's just say I'm 84 kilogram, and move it, and then underneath it says expected weight you can lose by taking GLP-1. So if I put 84 kilogram in, and let's just say I was 104 because I'm overweight, it will directly underneath show me in kilograms how much weight I can lose. But what it doesn't do is show you, it really should be another calculation that says if you don't take the right protein and the right exercise, you're also going to lose up to 40% of muscle and bone. So again, this is where I think Screen My Bones can really play a responsible role in partnering with these huge organizations to make sure that if people are going to lose weight, they're going to do it responsibly.
Have you seen any good protocols to be used with weight loss drugs, as we said, the exercise, your nutrition, etc., that in your experience have actually worked? So have you had clients come to you that says, I have taken Ozempic, I have taken all these things, where you're saying, actually, your screens come back okay? And did you ask them, what did you do differently specifically?
Well, there's two groups. There's definitely a group that you can see who are practicing what the right information is. They are taking a weight loss drug, but they're also making sure that they're very mindful of the nutrients that they're getting. And then they start going on a journey of they're taking all these nutrients, but they're still not getting the results. So again, the group that are taking the right dietary protein and hiring a personal trainer or getting themselves in the gym, getting the right zone 2 training, there has to be a lifestyle shift here, because again, it's not just a magic pill where you take a weight loss drug and that's it, life. People mistake fitness and aesthetics for health. There's a very different track there. And we want to be fit, we want to be aesthetically pleasing to ourselves, because I think mentally, if we don't feel comfortable in ourselves, then I think it doesn't matter what we do. So again, and then there's the group that certainly take the weight loss drugs, and I won't mention any names because some of these are public figures, but you can only turn on the news and see some of these celebrities and the skeletons, that you can see the bones. And that's such a shame. And that's because they are not taking it. But the ones that do, the ones that get the diet in place in terms of getting the right macronutrients, the micronutrients, the hydration, the movement, you almost see the weight drop, but there's a new glow, there's a healthiness to it. The quality of the muscles are good. And again, we need to check bones, because regardless of taking the weight loss drug, the biggest crisis I think we have is the skeletal health crisis, because nobody is checking the bones. And I always emphasize this, that you go to the gym to lift weights, to know what's going on externally. But why is it that nobody is checking their internal strength? And the fitness world is changing. We're doing a pilot scheme with David Lloyd's. They've got an amazing women's health initiative to really educate their members on, especially women going through the menopause. And there's so much misinformation and fragmented information. It's how do we distill it all in one place? So when people do get a scan or do want to improve in a certain area, how can we piece things together so there's the stepping stone in not just one area? If we scan you, we're not just going to leave you with a result. We actually want to walk and signpost you with some of the leading experts to make sure in 12 months' time, what you've committed to financially and energetically is that we can see the results there that's hopefully much stronger, better bone quality. And if we get there, you're probably going to have optimized hormones, good nutrients and good hydration, and hopefully a more independent, stronger life.
Forward to seeing the results of that study. Sticking with the protocol for the GLP-1s, was there any specific single factor, obviously from anecdotal evidence for you, that really stuck out? Realize obviously we need to cover all these basics, but this has actually really moved the needle on top of that?
Everybody's different. When you look at, I'm not a doctor, and I have a team of amazing partners that are doctors and some of the best in the world. So without answering that directly, I think everybody has to check in on their own medical records as to where they are. Methylation is a huge issue. I think when you take something like the GLP-1s, it really will expose other areas. And the one thing that we don't measure is organs. So I do know that the liver is super, super important. We have to check in on the king of organs, which is the liver. Because if your liver's a little bit fatty and it's stiff and there's problems there, then your body's inability to start detoxifying and breaking things down is then a second effect. So again, it's so complex because everybody's different. And if somebody's looking to take a weight loss drug, suddenly they get a new sense of confidence and the lifestyle changes. So I think what we've seen is that when people have spent 10 or 15 years, let's say obese, and suddenly they're now looking in the mirror and they're seeing a completely different person, we've seen lifestyle change completely. Somebody who is stagnant is now moving and going out because they feel more confident. But we just want to make sure that that continues and it's not just a short-lived 1 or 2 years, because I can tell you now in the next 3 to 5 years, when we look at the health crisis, we can refer back to a skeletal health crisis, which is the foundation. If we look 3 to 5 years from now and we're not responsible with these weight loss drugs, we are going to see such a devastation, I would say, to the economy. Because when you look at the 2 top reasons why people are absent from the workplace, number 1 is mental health and number 2 is MSK, so physical decline. So if we're all going to lose weight, we're going to see metabolic health just take a crash. And I actually think that osteoporosis is actually going to be sped up. But if we do it responsibly, I think we're all going to get what we need and not sacrifice something instant for long-term pain.
Fingers crossed on that. So let's take a step back. Let's make sure everyone's on the same page. Can you explain what osteoporosis actually is, both in medical terms and also in the way that someone who's never thought about their bones would understand?
Yeah, so let me just give you layman's terms, because I like to speak layman's, and obviously with me not being a medical doctor, I never like to give a medical answer to something. But really, osteoporosis is a degradation of our bones. So we have bone density. I don't have a prop here, but just imagine we had a long roll of paper. So just imagine a toilet roll, and around the edge you've got all of the white paper. If you think about that as bone density, and then inside of the toilet roll, this is a really bad analogy. But if you think about inside
I'm
of
enjoying
there,
it.
yeah, if you think about inside of there as the microarchitecture that's holding that up, so you've got bone density and you've got bone quality. Over time, we do lose bone density and we also lose bone quality. So we want to make sure that people understand where their foundational health is. And the word osteoporosis really is where a medical doctor can diagnose you into a risk category. And that's where we look at DEXA scans. So if I talk on that a little minute, we look at DEXA scans again as a reactive care system. But when you go for a DEXA scan, we have to ask ourselves, what is the purpose of a DEXA scan? The purpose of a DEXA scan is to measure your bone density. It gives you a T-score, a Z-score, and a fragility score. And layman's terms really is to predict what is the risk of you fracturing over the next 10 years. And if you fall into the category of osteoporosis, it'll be down to the medical doctor to assess your medical records to then say whether you need any bisphosphonates, Fosamax, because their job really is to reduce the risk of you fracturing, which is great. However, for the layman's side of things is you just have to remember that we're all human and cells are dying every second and increasing. So we need to increase bone density. And to do that, this is why we have to get the right nutrients, get the right type of training. And I just think that it's such a confusion that osteoporosis is a disease, because we know that osteoporosis is not a disease. It's just a deconditioning of the bone. And anything that's deconditioned can be reconditioned. So we just take a step up from there and we look at osteopenia. So if in the edits we can bring up a chart, we have green, yellow and red. And I like the traffic light system because it's so simple. And green is normal bone, yellow is osteopenia. So what's osteopenia? Osteopenia is a made-up term, literally a made-up term. And that sort of puts you into a category to show you that it's the onset of osteoporosis, meaning that your T-score, where your baseline, or when you hit peak bone mass, 1,000 people at your age would be on this curvature of line. And if you're below this, then, you would be then falling sub where you should be. And it's very interesting because when you get a report on the echo light, you can actually see the line where you're heading. So you have the age range at the bottom, and then you have a dot where you are, and then you have the optimal line, the normal, and then sub low. So wherever you are, it's not rocket science for you to see where you are and to where the trajectory is. And it's very powerful. So the word osteopenia and osteoporosis, whilst it might feel scary, it's really just an indication to say that your hang glider is lower down than it should be. And the length of your life is another 30, 40 years. We need to get back up to altitude.
And you mentioned T-score, Z-score, and fragility score. Which one is the most important, or which one should people pay most attention to, or is it all of them together?
Great question. I'm going to say from my simple mind, because I like things simple, okay? Because when we get too much complexity, we just move away. And I've explained it in my layman's terms, is that think about it like this, okay? You're going to look at a report, okay? And depending on what that report says, is either going to get you to take action or not, okay? We don't want you at the end of an ambulance where you've broke a hip, okay? So if you can get a report and see the T-score, the Z-score, and you have a consultant that explains everything, and we've done thousands of reports now, and we are taking a lot of time to make sure with the platform that people actually understand and actually educate, instead of consulting the report and saying, here's what a T-score is, here's what a Z-score is, here's what the fragility score is. People forget 95%. And if you mention the word osteoporosis to them, or they see it on their report, everything that you say goes out the window because it becomes very personal. So what I would say is, what is the most important thing to know is that osteoporosis can be reversed. So if anybody falls into that category, don't be disillusioned to think that's just the destiny and unfortunately you're probably going to break your hip like your grandmother or some family member. It's about what actions can you now take. So the most important thing I would say is to get a scan, because once you know your baseline, it's not the end, it's literally the beginning, which we've seen people take action when they can see the report, because we want to build out, we're actually building out resources and guidance to make sure from every area, from exercise, nutrition, hormones, lifestyle, where you can actually get the information that's needed. And obviously, if you need to see a doctor, we have bone doctors that you can book an appointment with. And if you want to go down that route, we want to make sure that responsibly people can get access to a doctor's consultation.
So if I understand it correctly, osteopenia is the stage before osteoporosis, and I believe about 54% of post-menopausal women actually have osteopenia already, and I think that's based on the T-score ranges. Now, what we're also seeing is that osteopenia is now showing up in younger women. Other than the GLP-1s, why do you think that is?
There's a predisposition genetically. I don't think there's just one answer, because we're all so unique. We could be undernourished, lack of impact. There's all types of things, I think so. But what we've experienced now, and I think we've scanned over 20,000 people in the age range that wouldn't typically be screened, so from 35 to 55. And it is alarming to see that a lot of people are much lower than you would expect. We're opening a tin of worms here. I always say it because nobody really knows how strong the bones are, I spoke recently at the Royal College of Medicine to 200 or 300 doctors. And again, without trying to make anybody wrong, when you ask people, do you know how strong your bones are? They kind of look at you like with a silly face thinking, why would I even need to know that? I'm only 40 years old. And that's the point. We've had 10 years worth of bone loss at 40. So why wouldn't we check? So I just think that the amount of people that we've scanned now, it's alarming to see that, I don't want to misquote the stats, but I think we've seen around 30% of the people that we scanned that fall into midline osteopenia -1 point. Osteopenia starts at -1 for those people that don't know. and then osteoporosis starts at minus 2.5. So osteopenia in that range, we're seeing people at around minus 1.8. And if you're 40 years old and you haven't actually gone through the menopause, a drop of estrogen, we're going to accelerate bone loss. It's like we're going to go near a cliff and then drop off. And this is why it's so important that we screen people much, much earlier, because once they know, they can do something about it, because it's one of those things that truly get missed.
To put that into perspective, when we say -1 and minus 2.5 on the T-score, what does the T-score actually measure?
It measures the bone mineral density. So a T-score is going to give you a measurement, which is what a DEXA does. DEXA will just measure the bone density and put you into those three categories. What's interesting is that DEXA does have something on there called TBS, which is a trabecular score, which for me would give you a better overall information that's going to give you a better or a more accurate predictive risk fracture. For whatever reason, it's very rare that I see these switched on DEXA machines. And this is where Echo Light really does shine, because there's no radiation and it measures both bone density, bone quality. It's very quick. And the best thing is it's deployable. If we're truly going to help people get on this sort of journey, then we have to deploy screening services across the world. So it's almost like hopefully in a couple of years' time, people think, you remember the days where you didn't even get a scan, you just got osteoporosis and that were it.
What's the difference between bone density and bone quality?
So it's the minerals in the bone, which is the T-score. The bone quality is the structure, the microarchitecture. So if you think about it like this, if I was the architect of this building, it's a very tall building that I'm in. If you think of the walls as density, okay, and it's good, we need strong walls. But if there's a crack in the wall, okay, we might get a plaster around to plaster it. But if we got a structural engineer to look at the foundations, the bone quality, and the structural engineer said, unfortunately, the foundations are not good, there's a huge risk of the building falling down. So don't get me wrong, density is important, but bone quality, the foundation, I would say is more important. It's not more important that you need to neglect the walls or the bone density. I think I know that the two is fundamental. We need good, strong bone quality and good, strong bone density. And it tends to be a lack of nutrients and a lack of impact. It's so simple. The amount of people, thousands that we've seen that are in osteoporosis now after 14 years, that if they do the following, pretty much everybody starts to stabilize the bones. And then over the next coming months and years, it's amazing how the body can adapt and respond. When you get the right exercise, the right nutrients, you go on a little bit of a journey, because some people are doing the right things, but they're not absorbing. So there's a little bit of a detective work, but ultimately we're going in the right path now. We're trying to get your body switched back on. And the body is so sophisticated. Imagine my grandmother, minus 2.7. I didn't know what a bone quality was then, because I didn't know that was even a thing we could do. But what I did see was the DEXA scan showed 0.3. And that's phenomenal. That's the bones of a 30-year-old. And not to mention, I saw my grandmother go from kyphosis, which is curving over at the top, like maybe a lot of old people. And her spine was straighter than a snooker cue. Her shoulders was back. She was completely stood up straight. So instead of looking at stats and reports, we have to look at the individual. We're human beings. And her independence, her confidence, it all came back. So for me, it was a blessing to see that this is possible, which now really gives me, sounds a bit corny, but the responsibility to know that if we can do it for one person, why on earth are we not doing it for everybody else? Because osteoporosis kills more people than breast cancer and ovarian cancer combined. It's scary. And then you look at that this could be avoided. So it's really about what do we need to do to get people the solution that's going to optimize their physical strength. And by the way, it doesn't start with power play. It doesn't start with biodensity, even though I'm with the company. It starts with the education and awareness, and then actually getting your baseline marker. And that's why we really want to bring to the forefront, the journey to bone health has got to start with you being educated on where you are on that trajectory on your bone health.
On the education, as we said, there's a worrying trend that osteopenia is actually showing up in younger women now. To what extent do you think, and obviously this again is anecdotal, is this down to us simply measuring more? 20 years ago, we wouldn't have measured unless someone was actually quite old and probably had something, versus people not feeling well. The system, all sorts of pollutants in our environment that actually suck up our minerals, our vitamins, and also stress doing the same thing.
Yeah. How do we survive a modern world? If we go back 20 years, the soil was probably much healthier. We're all stressed. I call it emotional constipation. We're all trying to do the best we can. But the reality is that with today's society where you can just order food online, it's not, I think the food source is just not clean unless you're at home and you cook in and you know where the ingredients are coming from. People say that's not possible, and whether it's affordability, whether it's because so many people are stressed and overworked, there's all that shaking in a cocktail. And the reality is, if we want to get back to true health, we have to come back home. We have to visit Dr. Ground. We have to come back and stop being so chaotic. We're not trying to tell everybody how to live a life, but fundamentally, we're not getting the right nutrients. We're stressed out. No matter, even if you're exercising and taking the right food, think about it. We are constantly being chased by a lion. The nervous system is so stressed. We're on survival all the time. So we're pumping cortisol, we're burning the adrenals, which is pulling from the bones, remember. There's a story I say that my father used to go downstairs at night time and take things out the pantry, loads of food. In the morning, he'd eat all the cookies or whatever. And at night time, when the body's trying to repair, it goes into the bone and it pulls minerals, it pulls all of the good stuff out. And again, so we have to manage our stress levels. It's not just going to the gym and getting the right nutrients. We really have to manage our whole lifestyle. And I think that's why we're putting so much effort into the platform to actually, we don't want to tell people what to do with their lifestyle, but if we don't address lifestyle, then, the tail's going to just wag the dog.
This is interesting because on that point, you've spoken about the link between bone health and immune system, so the field of osteoimmunology. This is actually something I haven't come across before. Can you unpack that for us?
I'm not sure if I'm qualified to unpack it, but everything's connected. Everything is connected. And we go on I'm so fascinated by the human body. And when we look at gout, if people have got gout, it's connected to the liver. So when you look at immunology, when you look at endocrinology, look at the liver side and hepatology, and it's fascinating how you would think, what's that got to do with this? What's that got to do with that? Everything is connected. And this is why the liver's so powerful. I've been on my own journey, as many people might have been in one area. And then they realize the power of that one thing that actually, let's just say you've got 20 problems and you address, I call it the ball, which ball hits all balls. So you could sort out 20 problems. But if I was to sort out this one problem, that problem would just get rid of the other 20 problems that you had. So with what you've just said there is, I think that if we can strengthen the skeletal system, ligaments, connective tissue, muscle quality, the receptors are in the muscle that pull in glycogen that help metabolic health. So it's all connected. It's not just about getting strong bones. It's about independence. It's about mobility. We don't get old and in pain. We get old and we don't move very much. Then we get in pain and then we become miserable. And then obviously you're back into the cocktail of unhealthiness. So the people that want to get healthy, they can't just address one thing. They have to look at the body as a whole system.
As you said, as a whole system, because if you think about it, bone marrow is actually an immune cell factory. Then you've got inflammatory cytokines that are driving bone reabsorption, and then this sort of goes both ways, right? So there's something more to look at there. Okay, so given that this is Biohacking Eve, let's actually go deeper on the female biology. So talk us quickly through what happens to women's bone during and after menopause. So hormonal mechanisms, speed of loss, and the numbers, specifically the statistics around that, because we've covered the process elsewhere already, but it'd be interesting to see what statistics you are seeing as well.
We're still uncovering, obviously, because how many menopausal women pre-post menopause have actually had bone scans. But what we're seeing is that the majority of people, women certainly, that get bone scans that are going through the menopause, it's quite devastating to see, because somebody's in their early 40s, mid 40s, early 50s. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The stats there to have that, we're seeing much more, but obviously that's a very small amount of people, considering that are those the global stats that women going through the menopause can lose up to 5% per year of bone loss per year, and over 3 years up to 20%.
Okay. So how does that compare to what happens in men? Are we talking about the same mechanism with testosterone, or is that fundamentally different?
Yeah, we all have hormones. It's an imbalance of hormones. As we're going through, the andropause is the opposite for the men. We too also suffer. So again, it comes back to simplicity, that we're all aging and we all deplete in certain areas, especially hormones. So if his testosterone's down, hormones are down in any way, shape or form, there's going to be an imbalance, and that's going to have a knock-on effect, not just to bone, but to everything, cognitive function. We're going to get inflammation. Most people don't check the bloods and have a comprehensive panel to start seeing what is going on. It's like a car. If you hear a noise, where's it coming from? If you're not a mechanic, you wouldn't have a clue. Are the wheels imbalanced? So when we look at the body, men certainly don't seem to be as statistically, the women are the ones that are more likely to get osteoporosis. But again, that we don't want to forget about us men. I talk a lot about women and menopause and women's health initiatives, but we're all human beings and we all have hormones, so we need to check them.
Yep. And so the statistics I've seen is the osteoporosis prevalence in women is 19.6% versus 4.4% in men over 50. And obviously you've got the menopause cliff with
And then what age range is that you're
This is
drawing?
over 50.
Over 50, yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So we're building as out our own data. And obviously from the age 30 to 55, we're probably going to have around 50,000 people screened in the next 8 months complete. So we're building our own sort of biobankers to see what that looks like. And it's very interesting because nobody, I don't think in the world seems to have any data below 50 really. So we're very excited in a responsible way to say, wow, this is why we should be screening, because if we can proactively go out there and screen, we're going to have predictive models to showcase how we can truly eliminate osteoporosis. And again, every other type of challenges that people have, it's going to hopefully increase the physical body.
Is one way of thinking about it is what's the most vulnerable group, and you should be looking at their bone health, even if they don't think they need to. So traditionally, we would have said postmenopausal women, but you're actually saying get a baseline in your 30s and 40s and go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. When you look at people with food disorders, bulimia, certainly people that are completely malnourished, we have to look at the not vulnerable, but the ones that you can clearly see are they're going to be suffering. Cancer patients, obviously with radiotherapy, chemo, people heavily on sedentary lifestyle, maybe because they've got knee injuries or they're disabled and they can't move very much. People that are sedentary tend to atrophy and speed up cell death much quicker. So obviously there's populations, even cyclists that are super fit. We're working with a team of cyclists because it's non-weight bearing. What they are very surprised to see is that they've trained the whole life. They're like jockeys, they're very light. When you look at the framework, everything's about light and speed, and they are the most fit people on planet Earth, these cyclists. And it's only when they fall off the bike and they actually break that they end up going and getting a DEXA scan. And again, this is reactive, you can see it. And their bone density is way lower than they thought. And they say, well, unfortunately, you've got osteoporosis. And they take that personally because they've dedicated the whole life to staying super fit. And then they realise that, yeah, cycling is a non-weight bearing exercise. So is rowing, so is swimming. So we have to look at impact, lifting heavy weights, things like biodensity that can help you load the bones. So yeah, there's so many populations that they should look at it. But I just come back to base level. Listen, we're all human. We're all got similar sort of biochemistry in the way that we age. We should just check in, and it should just be the basic fundamental of baseline checks, just like we would get as eye tested. We should get our bones checked.
You know what I found really interesting when you mentioned bulimia and eating disorder? Some of the things I found is that intermittent fasting, over-exercise, hormonal contraception, for example, these are also all quietly eroding bone mass and also the quality of it. So now we've covered the problem, and I think it's a bigger problem than most of us realize. So in part 2, Gary and I are going to get into what to actually do about it. We're going to cover the different scans available and why the gold standard might not be as golden as you think. A technology that can build bone density in 10 minutes a week with zero medication, and what to do if you don't have access to any of that. So we shall reconvene for part 2.
Thank you for joining me on this transformative journey. Your presence in this community is truly valued. Now, you may not realize it, but your words hold immense power. They have the ability to reach others who may benefit greatly from the wisdom shared here. If you found value in what you heard, I kindly ask you to take a moment to subscribe to Biohacking Eve, leave a glowing review on your preferred podcast platform, and share Biohacking Eve with your friends and family. Your support helps spread the message of health optimization for women far and wide. Lastly, I want to express my gratitude to you for investing in yourself. By prioritizing your well-being, you serve as an inspiration to others. I'm eagerly looking forward to bringing you many more exciting episodes, and thank you for being a vital part of our community. Live long and prosper, my friend. The Biohacking Eve Health Optimization for Women podcast is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice, and no doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content of this podcast is not intended to be substituted for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay obtaining medical advice for any medical condition they may have, and should seek the assistance of the healthcare professionals for any such conditions. In addition, the information on this podcast does not constitute investment or financial advice.